Hello and welcome back to the Purpose Pursuit podcast with me, Hannah Miller. How are you doing today? It is lovely to be with you. It is an absolute scorcher of a day. I wonder whether you're listening in your car and it's a beautiful day when you're listening back to this or watching it, but it is very hot here in my kitchen and my neighbour is mowing his lawn, so we've had to shut all the windows so I literally can hardly breathe. But it is a great day to be recording an episode about summer holiday reads, which is what I'm about to do. One of the things I intend to do every summer and maybe twice a year is I tell you about some of the books I've been reading, what they've meant to me and whether I'd recommend them to you and give you a few thoughts and insights on that. And I always try to do it in a way that helps me think about what have I learned from the book, or what are some of the narratives or the stories within the book that make me think about my own life, or some takeaways that we can get from that. So I'm going to whistle through a few books today and give you some top tips around some books that you might like to have a listen to. I haven't got them all with me in person because I am now a new Kindle convert. So a lot of the books I'm reading are actually in Kindle form now, which I am absolutely loving. The first book I want to mention today is actually one I've physically got, called Time Anxiety. Time Anxiety by Chris Guillebeau. That's how you say his name. He's the author of the New York Times bestseller, The $100 Startup, amongst loads of other work as well. And I have loved the work of Chris Guillebeau for many years now. I've read most of his books. I really enjoy his blogs. He has a manifesto called The Art of Nonconformity, which I think is so interesting. And he looks at all sorts of sort of self-development issues, or also running your own business. And his latest book, Time Anxiety, it feeds into a topic that I love to think about and learn more about. Just as a heads up, I managed to get Chris Guillebeau to come on the podcast, and we've got a guest episode with him, and that is so worth listening into. But I read this book regardless of that, and then I emailed him and said, would you please come on the podcast? And he said yes. So you just never know. Somebody might say yes if you ask them. So Chris Guillebeau's book, Time Anxiety, subtitle, The Illusion of Urgency and a Better Way to Live. I mean, even that just makes me sigh, because I feel like I live in a illusion of urgency. Actually, a delusion of urgency at times. I feel like my relationship with time is quite problematic. The sense of urgency, the daily routine futility of always feeling like I'm not getting enough done. And in this book, you are challenged to look at time differently. There's other works like this. Oliver Burkeman's book, 4,000 Weeks, is another one that challenges the way we deal with time. And I loved that book. I've talked about it before. Time Anxiety is probably a little bit more practical, a little bit more down to earth. He covers two types of time anxiety, which we discuss in the podcast episode with him. So I won't go into great detail. Sort of existential time anxiety. What am I doing with my life? I do a lot of that work with individuals who come and work with me. It's the whole point of the Purpose Pursuit. And then there is daily routine anxiety, which is how we feel about the urgency of every day, the amount of stuff that has to be done, remaining productive, staying on top of things. And he challenges the myth of relentless hustle. He challenges that whole concept of, if I just work a bit harder, I'll get more done. And he gets us to think about it quite practically, quite down to earth, in a way that is actually applicable to everyday normal humans' lives like yours and mine. He invites readers to think about their relationship with time and to get more intentional. And one of the big takeaways I took away from this book was just this idea of being more intentional with my time, around slowing down, about taking some of that pace out of the stuff that I do. Now, I love a bit of pace, and I'm never going to be somebody who's deeply contemplative. That's not how I'm made. But there is a time and there is a moment when you can feel like you are flipping over into just like this state of overdrive. And I feel, as I'm reading this book, that I've allowed that state of overdrive to take place. And the way this book connects to the idea of purpose is that it reminds us that living on purpose isn't about doing more. It's not about getting more done. It's about connecting with what really matters and being deeply present with that. And this book is a reminder of that. There's a bit in the book where he talks about, I'm going to die one day. And the point in that is not to get existential about it, but that what are we saying yes to? What are we saying no to? And living with that idea of an end or an eternity, depending on your view of life, beyond right now. What am I going to do with my time right now? Do I want to say yes to something that I really don't want to do and feels meaningless? I don't mean saying yes to things that it might be inconvenient. I just mean something that you think, actually, why am I even doing this? And he flips this idea around, how do I make my life meaningful now? I think this is a 4-star book. So I'm going to rate the books today out of 5. And 4-star is like solidly good for me. A solid, good book, definite takeaways from it. And I really recommend a read. And I guess a question that you could take, even if you don't read this book and you can go away and reflect on, is what is one small thing that you can stop doing to reclaim time for what really, truly matters to you? What's one small thing that you can stop doing to reclaim time for what truly matters to you? That could be reducing your doom scrolling time. It could be stopping doing a certain chore that you're doing maybe too often, or whatever it might be for you. What can you stop doing to reclaim a bit of time? Because we can reclaim time, and we can shift our attention, and we can reduce this time anxiety. I've definitely found it helpful, and it made me breathe a bit deeper. So great book, really, really worth your time if you want to think about time. Lol. Okay, Time Anxiety by Chris Guillebeau. The next book is a memoir. I love a memoir. I don't know how you feel about memoirs, but I actually really like reading life stories. I think my favourite memoir still is, of all time, I Am, by, I've just had one of those senior moments now where I can't even remember who wrote it, and I've read loads of books by her. She wrote Hamnet. Let me look at my shelf. Hold on. Maggie O'Farrell came to me. Maggie O'Farrell. I think we'll leave that in because that just is very much, you can probably empathise with me. I couldn't get there. I Am is probably my favourite memoir. But I had the absolute joy and privilege of pre-ordering and reading the day it came out, Split Ends and New Beginnings by Olga Thompson. I'm also interviewing Olga Thompson and had a chance to talk to her. You will know her as Big Fat Greek Mother. That's who you'll know her as, because that's her handle on Instagram. And she spends her days being a comedian, talking about family life, raising teenage boys, and trying to really lift people's spirits. But her life story is so interesting. She is a young girl that came to the UK as a little girl from Greece, and her parents were immigrants. And she talks about her early days of life in Great Britain in the 1980s, being a teenager in that time, and the experience that she had of actually not even being able to speak English when she started school. So her grandma, that was one of the things that really stood out to me. She was brought up a lot by her grandma because her mum was busy running a hairdresser's, and she spoke Greek at home. So that meant when she went to primary school, she had no English. And what an unbelievable thing to have gone from being somebody who didn't speak English to now performing on a stage, and everything she does in between. She also was severely bullied as a teenager, and she tells some of that story in her book and some of the profound impact that's had on her. And I imagine as a social media influencer now, she still experiences some really unkind things. And she talks all the way through about some of the rejection she's faced and the difficulties she's had, but with a really positive spin. It is by no means a sort of sob story kind of memoir. This is what happened and this is where my life is now. She goes through a period of really quite deep depression. She lost a family member in really terrible circumstances, and there's so many parts of her story that you can see are deeply painful, but she has looked to redeem that. She talks about her own personal faith throughout and the impact that's had on her life, meeting her husband, bringing up her boys, and how she has come to a place of not caring what people think. That was really key all the way through the book. From somebody who was so bullied and such an outsider for so many reasons, she has taken all of that and decided, well, people are going to say stuff anyway, so let me be me. She's funny, she's warm, she's witty, she's kind. It's lots of really short chapters. And there's another thing that I really like about the book. It's not just a memoir. At the end of every chapter, there's a little section, just a paragraph, which is about how you can apply what's in that chapter to your own life. So it's got like these little reflective bits in there, which I just loved because it made that memoir come alive for your life and my life. And if you enjoy a memoir, you're going to love this. She talks about childhood, she talks about motherhood, she talks about aging, she talks about being an outsider, she talks about facing bullies, facing loss. and how you can do that, and how you can actually triumph. And if you're feeling like life hasn't turned out as you would hope, and maybe you're a little bit older when you're listening to this, if you're one of my older listeners, and by older I just mean anyone who's like, my age, you might find it really inspiring to listen to her work and to read her book, because she's doing so much fantastic stuff, not just for herself, but the charities she's involved with as well. You will find it full of encouragement and full of laughs as well. I loved it. I really, really enjoyed it. If you're not going to read it, a reflective question for you is, how does your background inform who you are today, and what strengths have emerged from it? Because that is a big part of her story, how her own story, her own background has really informed who she is today, and how have you become strong because of that? That's another 4-star. My next book is called A Man Called Ove. Okay, it's spelled O-V-E, so all the way through the book, my brain wanted to call him Ove, but it's pronounced Ove because he's Swedish, and it's by Fredrik Backman, who is very quickly becoming my absolute favourite author ever, after maybe Jane Austen. I adore his writing, and I just am going to devour as much of it as I can. I've read other things by him, but I absolutely loved the book. It is a 6-star book for me. Easy peasy, 6-star, 7-star. I adored it. It made me cry. It made me laugh out loud. I was sucked into the characters from the get-go. Ove is a curmudgeonly widower who discovers love, community and purpose after the arrival of new neighbours. Think a little bit Christmas Carol. There's a hint of that throughout the book. Ove is this wonderful, complex man struggling with all kinds of grief and pain, but you love him even so. Even though he's difficult, you love him. And you love all of these neighbours that start to become part of the tapestry of that book. They're so multi-dimensional, they're so well developed, so many of them are, and Ove is so well developed that I just was devastated when I'd finished the book. I don't want to say too much about it because I don't want to ruin what happens for you, but if you haven't read it, it's been out a while. This is not a new book. I can't believe I'm only just reading it. I would so recommend it. It's actually a film as well called A Man Called Otto with Tom Hanks, which I have not seen yet. I'm really keen to watch, although I'm a bit worried that it could spoil it for me. You never know, do you, with the film? But the book is beautiful, wonderful, funny, heart-wrenching. I actually finished it one Saturday morning and came down the stairs. My husband, Sam, was already awake and he was in the kitchen. I came into the kitchen and just sobbed. I was sobbed it had finished. And I just found it such a beautiful, cathartic read. I could cry now just thinking about it. So if that's not an endorsement, I don't know what else to say. Absolutely excellent writing. 6 stars at the very least. The next book I wanted to mention is called An American Marriage by Tayari Jones. And I really hope I've said her name correctly, Tayari Jones. Now, disclaimer, I am 82% through the book. I know that because I read it on a Kindle. And so I haven't quite finished it. But An American Marriage is a really sort of poignant story that is based on a marriage that gets disrupted. It is disrupted by something that happens, something that's an injustice, it is disrupted by people's choices. It's disrupted by life events that unfold that cause these people's lives, who are the storytellers, to turn out in a way that they never expected. This book has a change of voice. So each chapter rotates around some of the key characters. You've got the key character, which is Roy, who is the husband in the marriage, and his wife Celestial. And then there are other characters, at least one other, that narrates throughout the book. So you have to get used to a shifting voice. What I loved about this book so far is that it's really pacey. She doesn't take ages to get into the main thing that's happening. And I really felt like I was in and invested quickly. Some books I find can take a while to warm up to, but actually this book, I enjoyed it from the get-go. I think probably the negative for me is that I often talk about this. I don't really love anybody in it. There's a couple of side characters that I've got more warmth to, but they're all making a bit of a mess of it, which is difficult then to feel. I don't feel a lot of warmth towards them, I guess. That's one of the challenges of it. But I am really keen to finish it. I have enjoyed it. I am invested in the outcomes. And I felt there's quite a bit of complexity of how situations unfold and choices people make that we might never expect them to do. And how, you have to get the full picture to really understand what's going on. And I think that's a big point of the book. It was recommended to me. I can't actually remember who recommended it to me, but inside the front cover, I think it was also one of Oprah's books and also one of Barack Obama's Reads of the Year. So it comes with a lot of high praise, and I have enjoyed reading it. But there's when life throws stuff at you that you don't expect, it can send your life in a direction that is nothing like the life plan. And I think that is one of the overarching themes of the book. And that can happen to me and you. And as you're reading it, you will empathize with this idea that you didn't expect to be here. You didn't ask to be here. And there's quite a poignant part later on where really the grief and the rage for one of the characters of everything that didn't work out, that wasn't even their fault. And all of that collides for them, and they realise how broken they are by some stuff that was nothing to do with them. And I found that really moving. Again, a reflective question for me and you that we could take from the book is, what values would you choose to guide you if your life wasn't going to plan? And how prepared are you to stand by them? And I think that's a really, really good question. Like, what are my values? And are they something that when things are less comfortable, when life throws the worst of it at me, I'm still going to prioritize those values. I'm still going to live according to the values that I have said are important to me. When my little storm shelter has a storm, am I going to stick with the values that I said I was going to? And I think the book really explores this idea so well, and the challenges that people face when push comes to shove. Can they really do it? Can they do the right thing? Okay, next book is Babel, or The Necessity of Violence by R.F. Kuang. And I think I've just said her surname wrong, because I've talked about her before because she wrote Yellowface. And I'm not sure I've said it correctly this time, so I'm really sorry. But rather than, totally butcher it, I'm just going to move on. This author also wrote Yellowface, which I didn't like. Babel came really highly recommended to me. Loads of people said, you should read this. You'll find it really interesting. It's quite a thick book. It was quite a tome to get your head into. And I guess, in a nutshell, it's got a little bit of fantasy, dystopian type of infusement to it. And it's a critique of colonialism and language as power. And it's set in 19th century Oxford. So the author actually went to Oxford to do a postgrad. She didn't study there, but I think she did a postgrad there. So she has experience of living there. She's an American of Asian descent, and her story weaves together. It's complex, and it looks at this made-up institution called Babel, which is right in the heart of Oxford, University of Oxford, in the 19th century. And the students of Babel are translators. And again, I don't want to get into all the complexities because I will ruin it if I do. But these students who are translators, there is a fantasy element as to what they're able to do, the power they have with this translation, which essentially gives them empire power to go out and have advantage over other nations of the world. And the students come thinking they're coming to get involved with, this work of translation. And there's like this dark undertone to what it is that they're doing. One of the things I loved about the book was the beautiful use of language. The characters were developed, and you got to know them throughout the book. And she plays on words all the way through. The exploration of language was so geeky and interesting, and I really loved that. And there were loads of footnotes and loads of things to look at. What I didn't love is that I felt it was a bit preachy. Sometimes I think when people are trying to make a point, I felt it was really obvious. Like, actually, a friend of mine said she didn't think it was preachy at all. And maybe it just felt really obvious to me. And you might read it and feel differently. But it felt preachy. It felt like everyone was just angry. It felt like, again, whoever they were in the story, they were just angry with everybody, and it felt a bit one-dimensional. So where I said the characters in A Man Called Uwe were multi-dimensional, I felt like it was a really one-track exploration of empire building, colonialism, that I felt very angry and clunky and preachy. But I did want to finish it. I did want to know what happened. I did feel like it was a lot better than Yellowface, in my humble opinion. I really enjoyed it. And it did cover some really important topics around the way we see things. And actually, there were some really good moments where you got drawn into what it feels like to be a person who is on the outside looking in an institution, whether that's Oxford or whether that is visiting another country or whatever that might be, or if you're in the UK from another country. So there were some really good bits in there that helped explore what goes on both in terms of class and race and backgrounds. All of that was very, very good. And it encourages us to think about how we use power, the power of language. It encourages us to question what is going on around us. And there are some really powerful things in there. I want to give it like 3.5 stars. So it's probably a 3-star though. I wouldn't give it 4, even though I have to say in many ways it's an excellent book. I think the reason I'm saying this is there was the preachiness that I felt, and I just didn't feel connection with the characters in a way that I like to. So that's quite a personal feeling really, rather than a criticism directly. Next one. Miss Austen by Jill Hornby. Now, I wanted to read this because, as I've said already, I love Jane Austen, and they made it into a BBC series about the book. And it has a stellar cast, loads of people whose names I'm not even going to try and remember, but loads of people you will have heard of were in it. And I was really keen to watch it, so I got the book to read. And I was a bit disappointed. That's all, really. It's a 3-star. Again, I wanted to finish it. It's a story about Jane Austen's sister, Cassandra, and it explores their relationship as sisters, the loyalty she feels to her, and the right to personal expression, really. The roles we play in other people's lives and our own. And there are lots that it was really lovely about it. I can't quite put my finger on why I'm not giving it more stars. I need to probably think about that a little bit more. But again, I didn't feel like the depth of character connection that I could have done. But it was a really interesting idea of how Cassandra is trying to protect Jane's legacy when Jane has died. And actually, there were a couple of parts in it that were absolutely 5-star. There was a beautiful bit of narrative around their relationship as sisters that actually made me cry. I'm incredibly close to my sister. And there was some part of the story about their relationship as sisters and how close they were, and then how she coped when she lost Jane, because Jane died younger than anyone would have hoped. And that is a beautiful part of the book. So maybe it's a 3.5. But if you're looking for something that's set in a period and you like Jane Austen and you like that kind of stuff, you are going to enjoy it. It just hasn't quite made it into my top favourites. One thing that we can think about from the book, a reflective question, is what behind the scenes roles have you had that actually shape who you are and shapes what you leave behind? And I think that's a really good question. Like those of us who are mothers and fathers and just other roles that we might play, you are shaping things behind the scenes in a way you might not realise. And the story of Cassandra is that she's shaping Jane's legacy for the years to come. And actually there is truth behind some of the story. I mean, it's an embellishment, but there is truth behind it. Okay, next book. There Are Rivers in the Sky by Elif Shafak. Elif Shafak also wrote The Island of Missing Trees, which I really enjoyed. It's the book, if you've come across it, where the tree is the narrator of the book, which is fascinating and bizarre. It is a time-travelling, interwoven epic of a book. She writes these kind of dense, big deal books. They are complicated, not in a kind of, you've got to be really intelligent to read it complicated, but you can tell she's unbelievably intelligent. And these 3 characters, across timelines, their stories connect. And it's called There Are Rivers in the Sky because they're connected by this idea of water. I don't want to try and explain it too much because it's a little bit difficult for me to do in a short podcast. But this deep idea of how these people's lives connect and how their stories and their family stories kind of connect to one another from different centuries and different times and different countries. It also talks about trauma and our memories. The idea of community and marginalised people groups. One of the big parts of the story is one of the characters is from the Yazidi people. And I learned a lot about their experiences through reading the book. Even though it's a story, it's very much a story, and the characters are developed, and you're attached to them. I think I loved Arthur, who was a little boy born in the slums and about 200 years ago. And I really enjoyed his part that he played within the book. But these stories connect with one another in a way that you could never imagine. And when the book starts, you're transported through time, and it takes a little bit of time to get your head around it. But the stories start to get closer and closer and closer as the story goes on. And there was one line in it that really made me stop and think, which was about this idea. I think one of the characters says every human being would live a better life if they had the chance to sit down for 1 hour with their ancestors. And I thought about that, and I thought, who are the ancestors that I would like to sit down with and talk to and understand? And they're essentially saying we'd understand so much more about now if we could think about all the stories that come before, our stories that come before. I think Elif Shafak is quite interested in how we inherit trauma and how things that have happened in previous generations are passed to us in some way, shape or form, and how we need to understand some of that story and narrative to actually have healing and freedom in our own lives. It's a really beautiful book, really clever, and like a proper book. Do you know what I mean by that? Like really kind of proper in the way it's come together with it's she's a proper author is I guess what I'm trying to get at. I'm giving it 4 out of 5 only because sometimes it was a little bit meandering for me, but I mean for some people it will easily be a 5-star book, and I can totally understand why. Definitely worth your time if you want to commit to something a little bit more and learn about things that you might not know about, like for example that the perspective of the Yazidi people, which is really well represented in the book. It definitely makes you think. It definitely makes you think about the way we are connected to one another and to our pasts and to our ancestors as well. One quick one. I listened to this on audio and I listened to it as quick as I possibly could. None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. Absolutely brilliant book. I found it twisty and turny. It's a thriller. It's something quite different to what I normally listen to. It was compelling. It was about 2 women in their 40s who have a chance encounter, who were born on the same day, and how their lives have gone in very different directions. But the one woman becomes quite fixated with the other, and how their stories unfold. Very fast-paced, psychological thriller, quite dark. Listen to it on Audible. Brilliant Audible production. 2 women who are narrating it throughout. And I literally disappeared down a rabbit hole until I'd finished it because I just wanted to know what happened. It's about what's true, what's not true, family dynamics. Are we really living true lives? Are we pretending? What things are we believing? What family secrets are there within the narrative? So it's a 5-star book for me, not because it's the best book ever written, but because I was committed, I was all in. It had the pace, and it definitely was massively page turning in a metaphorical sense because I was listening in my ears. And the last book I also haven't quite finished, but I want to mention it, which is called The Dose Effect by TJ Power. TJ Power kindly, quite amazingly, has read and endorsed my book. He's written me a lovely endorsement of the work that I've done in The Purpose Pursuit. In the book, he goes into more detail about something that I talk about in my work when I talk about the power of story and the impact of chemicals in our brain and how that affects the way we think and we respond and how people hear our stories. And this whole book is about 4 chemicals, 4 neurotransmitters and the roles they play in our life. He talks about dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin and endorphins. And I am really enjoying this book. It's a book that, again, is simplifying something that lots of people have written about before. It is not something that I haven't read or understood, but I really want my children to read it, my teenagers, and there are things within it that are really applicable to us making those small tweaks and changes in our life, which is what I'm always talking about, that make our life better. And I felt very challenged by the dopamine chapter, which has meant that I'm already implementing some of the changes in my life based on his recommendations, because when we're chasing dopamine, then we go into this like racy urgency, which then affects our time anxiety and so on and so forth. So it's a really brilliant, practical book, which takes books, that other people have written about. This is not a new topic, but he's simplifying it. He's making it practical. He's making it something that everybody, you, me, can make tweaks in our life so that our dopamine's in the right levels and that we can have more and more of those other happy hormones that we need in our life that actually are good for us. The oxytocin that comes from gratitude and contribution to society, the serotonin that we need from sunlight and nature and deep sleep, and endorphins that come from exercise and music and laughter. So it's not like these are things that you won't have heard about before, but the breakdown, the way it's explained, and the practical element of it, I think is really, really excellent. And like I said, the dopamine principles I am already implementing in my life. So I've set up my bedroom differently so that my phone is now charged on the other side of the room. I have completely changed the way my screen time is done. I am not able to access certain things before a certain time of day and after a certain time of night now. And I'm feeling more in control of a situation that I could feel was rapidly getting out of control. So again, not rocket science. It is science and simplified, but something that we can do, and it helps us to care for our mind and body in a way that is just foundational for a purposeful life. So I'm massively grateful to TJ for him endorsing my book, and I want to fully endorse this one in return. And I guess a reflective question for you is to think about, which of those 4 elements of your life, the dopamine, the oxytocin, the serotonin, and the endorphin, are you neglecting? And what small tweak can you bring into your life to help you live more purposefully? So, as we come into land, I hope that's given you some reads that you can think about, something that you might want to take on your summer holiday or just read on your bedtime, a whole different raft of collections. And I'd love to hear some recommendations for me. I'm always on the lookout for a good book to read, and I'd love to know what you think of the ones I recommended. So happy reading. Bye-bye.